Fatherland videos. We have a mythology read from Tales from the Arabian Nights. I'm pretty sure that we're gonna have to take some breaks during this read. These mythology reads are pretty long. This book is translated by Andrew Lane, illustrations by Edmund Dulac and others, afterward by Pete Hamill. We're reading the mythology of the Hunchback. We might be able to get through it without taking any breaks. Maybe. We'll see how it goes. We're on page 150 in the kingdom of Kashgar, which is, as everybody knows, situated on the frontiers of the Great Tartary. They lived long ago a tailor and his wife who loved each other very much. One day, when the tailor was hard at work, a little hunchback came and sat at the entrance of the shop and began to sing and play his tambourine. The tailor was amused with his antics and thought he would take him home to divert his wife. The hunchback having agreed to his proposal, the tailor closed his shop and they set off together. When they reached the house, they found the table ready laid for supper, and in a very few minutes, all three were sitting before a beautiful fish, which the tailor's wife had cooked. But unluckily, the hunchback happened to swallow a large bone, and in spite of the tailor and his wife could not do to help him, died of suffocation in an instant. Besides being very sorry for the poor man, the tailor and his wife were very much frightened on their own account, for if the police came to hear of it, worthy couple ran the risk of being thrown into prison for willful murder. In order to prevent the dreadful calamity, they both set about inventing some plan which would throw suspicion on someone else. And at that last, they made up their minds that they could not do no better than select a Jewish doctor who lived close by as the author of the crime. So the tailor picked up the hunchback by his head, while his wife took his feet and carried him to the doctor's house. They knocked at the door, which opened directly onto a steep staircase. A servant soon appeared, feeling her way down the dark staircase, and inquired what they wanted. "Tell your master," said the tailor, "that we have brought a very sick man for him to cure." And he added, holding out some money, "Give him this in advance, so that he may not feel he is wasting his time." The servant remounted the stairs to give the message to the doctor. And the moment she was out of sight, the tailor and the wife carried the body swiftly after her, propped it up at the top of the staircase, and ran home as fast as their legs could carry them. Now the doctor was delighted at the news of a patient, for he was too young to have had many of them, that he was transported with joy. "Get a light," he called to the servant, "and follow me as fast as you can." Rushing out of his room, he ran toward the staircase. There he nearly fell over the body of the hunchback, and without knowing what it was, gave it such a kick that it rolled right down to the bottom, very nearly dragged the doctor after it. A light," he cried again. When it was brought, he saw that he had done. He was almost beside himself with terror. "Holy Moses," he exclaimed. "Why did I not wait for the light? I have killed the sick man whom they brought me, and if the sacred ass of the elders does not come to my aid, I am lost. It will not be long before I am laid to jail as a murderer." Agitated though he was, and with reason, the doctor did not forget to shut the house door, lest someone passer-by might chance to see what had happened. He then took up the corpse and carried it into his wife's room, nearly driving her crazy with fright. "It's all over with us," she wailed. "If we cannot find some means of getting the body off the house, once let the sun rise, we can hide it no longer. How were we driven to commit such a terrible crime?" "Never mind that," returned the doctor. "The thing is to find a way out of it." For a long while, the doctor and his wife continued to turn over in their minds a way to escape, but could not find any that seemed good enough. At last, the doctor gave it up altogether and resigned himself to bear the penalty of his misfortune. But his wife, who had twice his brains, suddenly exclaimed, "I have thought of something. Let us carry the body to the roof of the house and lower it down to the chimney of our neighbor of the Muslimin." Now the Muslimin was employed by the Sultan and furnished his table with oil and butter. Part of his house was occupied by a great storeroom where rats and mice held high level. The doctor jumped at his wife's plan. They took up the hunchback and, passing cords under the armpits, let him down into the purveyor's bedroom so gently that he really seemed to be leaning against the wall. When they felt he was touching the ground, they drew up the cords and left him. Scarcely had they returned to their house when the purveyor entered his room. He had spent the evening at a wedding feast and had a lantern in his hand. In the dim light it cast, he was astonished to see a man standing in his chimney. But being naturally courageous, he seized the stick and made up straight for the supposed thief. "Ah," he cried, "so it is you, and not the rats and mice who steal my butter. I'll take care of that. You don't want to come back." So saying, he struck him several hard blows. The corpse fell on the floor, but the man only redoubled his blows, till at length it occurred to him that it was odd the thief should not lie so still and make no resistance. Then, finding he was quite dead, a cold fear took possession of him. "Wretch that I am," said he, "I have murdered a man. Ah, my revenge has gone too far. Without the help of Allah, I am undone. Cursed be the gods which have led me to my ruin." Already he felt the rope round his neck. But when he had gone over the first shock, he began to think of some way out of the difficulty, and seizing the hunchback in his arms, he carried him out into the street. Leaning him against the wall of a shop, he stole back to his own house without once looking behind him. A few minutes before the sun rose, a rich Christian merchant who supplied the palace with all sorts of necessaries left his house after a night of feasting to go to the bath. Though he was very drunk, he was yet sober enough to know that the dawn was at hand and all good of the Muslim men would shortly be going to prayer. So he hastened his steps, lest he should meet someone on his way to the mosque who, seeing his condition, would send him to prison as a drunkard. In his haste, he jostled against the hunchback, who fell heavily upon him, and then the merchant, thinking he was being attacked by a thief, knocked him down with one blow of his fist. He then called loudly for help, beating the fallen man all the while. The chief policeman of the quarter came running and found a Christian ill-treating a Muslim man. "What are you doing?" he asked indignantly. "He tried to rob me," replied the merchant, "and very nearly choked me." "Well, you have had your revenge," said the man, catching hold of his arm. "Come, be off with you." As he spoke, he held out his hand to the hunchback to help him up, but the hunchback never moved. "Oh," the policeman went on, looking closer. "So this is the way a Christian has impudence on the treatment of a Muslim man." And seizing the merchant in a firm grasp, he took him to an inspector of police, who threw him into a prison till the judge should be out of bed and ready to attend his case. All this brought the merchant to his senses, but the more he thought of it, the less he could understand how the hunchback could have died merely from the blows he had received. The merchant was still pondering on this subject when he was summoned before the chief of police and questioned about his crime, which he could not deny. As the hunchback was one of the Sultan's private jesters, the chief of police resolved to defer sentence of death until he had consulted his master. He went to the palace to demand an audience and told his story to the Sultan, who only answered, "There is no pardon for a Christian who kills a Muslim man. Do your duty." So the chief of police ordered a gallows to be erected and sent to criers to proclaim in every street in the city that a Christian was to be hanged that day for having killed a Muslim man. When all was ready, the merchant was brought from the prison and led to the foot of the gallows. The executioner knotted the cord firmly round the unfortunate man's neck and was just about to swing him into the air, when the Sultan's purveyor dashed through the crowd and cried, panting, to hang the man. "Stop, stop, don't be in such a hurry. It was not he who did the murder, it was I." The chief of police was present to see that everything was in order, put several questions to the purveyor, who told him the whole story of the death of the hunchback and how he had carried the body to the palace where he had been found by the Christian merchant. "You are going," he said to the chief of police, "to kill this innocent man, for is it impossible that he should have murdered a creature who was dead already? It is bad enough for me to have slain a Muslim man without having it in conscience that a Christian who is guiltless should suffer through my fault." Now the purveyor's speech had been made in a loud voice and was heard by all the crowd. Even if he had wished it, the chief of police could not have escaped setting the merchant free. "Loose the cords from the Christian's neck," he commanded, turning him to the executioner, "and hang this man in his place, seeing that by his own confession he is the murderer." The hangman did as he was bid and was trying the cord firmly when he was stopped by the voice of the Jewish doctor, beseeching him to pause, for he had something very important to say. The doctor fought his way through the crowd and reached the chief of police. "Worshipful sir," he began, "the Muslim man who you have desired to hang is unworthy of death. I am alone am guilty. Last night a man and a woman were strangers to me, knocked on my door, bringing with them a patient for me to cure. The servant opened it, but having no light, was hardly able to make out their faces. Though she readily agreed to wake me and to hand me the fee for the services, while she was telling me her story, they seemed to have carried the sick man to the top of the staircase and left him there. I jumped up in a hurry without waiting for a lantern, and in the darkness I fell against something which tumbled headlong. down the stairs and never stopped till it reached the bottom. I hurried down to see what had fallen. When I examined the body, I found it was quite dead, and the corpse was that of the hunchback Muslim man. Terrified at what he had done, my wife and I took the body on the roof and laid it down the chimney of our neighbor, the purveyor. You were just about to hang. The purveyor, finding him in his room, naturally thought he was a thief and struck him such a blow that the man fell down and lay motionless on the floor. Stooping to examine him and finding him stone dead, the purveyor supposed that the man had died from the blow he had received. But of course, this was a mistake, as you will see from my account, and I am only the murderer. And although I am innocent in any wish to commit a crime, I must suffer for all it is that the same else have the blood of the two Muslim men on my conscience. Therefore, send me away this man, I pray you, and let me take his place, as it is who am I guilty. On hearing the declaration of the Jewish doctor, the chief of police commanded that he should be led to the gallows and the Sultan's purveyor go free. The cord was placed around the neck of the doctor, and his feet had already ceased to touch the ground when the voice of the tailor was heard beseeching the executioner to pause one moment and listen to what he had to say. "Oh, my lord," he cried, turning to the chief of police, "how nearly have you caused the death of 3 innocent people? But if you will only have the patience to listen to my tale, you shall know who it is real culprit. If someone has to suffer, it must be me. Yesterday at dusk, I was working in my shop with a light of heart when the little hunchback, who was more than half drunk, came and sat in the doorway. He sang me several songs, and then I invited him to finish at evening at my house. He accepted my invitation, and when we went away together at supper, I helped him to slice a fish, but in eating into the bone stuck in his throat, and in spite of all we could do, he died in a few minutes. We felt deeply sorry for his death, but fearing lest we should be held responsible, we carried the corpse to the house of the doctor. I knocked and desired that the servant to beg her master to come down as fast as possible and to see the sick man, whom we had brought for him to cure. And I placed a piece of money in her hand as the doctor's fee. Directly she made and had disappeared, I dragged the body to the top of the stairs and then hurried away with my wife back to our house. In descending the stairs, the doctor accidentally knocked over the corpse and finding him dead, believed that he himself was the murderer. But now you know the truth. Set him free and let me die in him instead." The chief of police and the crowd prospectors were lost in astonishment at the strange events to which the death of the hunchback had given rise. "Loosen the doctor," said he into the hangman, "and string up the tailor instead, since he had made confession of this crime. Really, one cannot deny that this is a very singular story, and it deserves to be written in letters of gold." The executioner speedily untied the knots, which confirmed the doctor was passing the cord round the neck of the tailor, when the Sultan Kagash, who had missed his gesture, happened to make inquiry of his officers as to what had happened of him. "Sire," replied they, "the hunchback, having drunk more than good for him, escaped from the palace and was seen wandering about the town, where this morning he was found dead. A man arrested for having caused his death and held in custody till all gallows was erected. At the moment that he was about to suffer punishment, first one man arrived and then another, each accusing himself of the murder, and this went on for a long time. At the present instant, the chief of police engaged in questioning a man who declares that he alone is the true assassin." The Sultan of Kashgar no sooner heard these words than he ordered an usher to go to the chief of police and to bring all the persons concerning the hunchback's death, together with the corpse. The usher hastened on and ran, but was only just in time, for the tailor was positively swinging in the air when his voice fell upon the silence of the crowd, commanding the hangman to cut down the body. The hangman, recognizing the usher as the king's servants, cut down the tailor. And then the usher, seeing the man safe, sought the chief of police and gave him the sultan's message. Accordingly, the chief of police at once set out for the palace, taking with him the tailor, the doctor, the purveyor, and the merchant. Who bore the dead? Hunchback on their shoulders, and followed by the large crowd of the spectators who had gathered to witness the execution. When the procession reached the palace, the chief of police prostrated himself at the feet of the sultan and related all that they knew of the matter. The sultan listened with an air of pleasure, which fulfilled the tailor and his friends with hope. However, just as he was about to turn his grand visor with an order, a barber stepped forward from the crowd and knelt humbly at the feet, saying, "Will you highness graciously be pleased to let me examine the body?" "What business is that of yours?" asked the sultan with a smile. But seeing that the barber had some reason for his request, he commanded that the body of the hunchback be laid before him. The barber then knelt down and took the head on his knees, looking at it attentively. Suddenly he burst into such loud laughter that he fell right over backwards. And when he recovered himself enough to speak, he turned to the sultan. "The man is no more dead than I am," he said. "Watch me." As he spoke, he drew a small case of medicines from his pocket and rubbed the neck of the hunchback with some of the ointment and made the balsam. Next, he opened his mouth and, with the help of a pair of pincers, drew the bone from his throat. At this moment, the hunchback sneezed, stretched himself up, and opened his eyes. The sultan and all those who saw this operation did not know which to admire most: the consultation of the hunchback, who had apparently been dead a whole night and mostly of one day, or the skill of the barber, whom everyone now began to look upon as a great man. His Highness now ordered his private historian to write down an account of what had happened, so that in the years to come, the miraculous escape of the four men who had thought themselves murderers might never be forgotten. And he did not stop there, for in order to wipe out the memory of what they had undergone, he commanded that all the tailor, the doctor, the purveyor, and the merchant should each be clothed in his presence with a robe from his own wardrobe before they have returned. As for the barber, he bestowed on him a great large pension and kept him near his own person. This was The Hunchback, Tales from the Arabian Nights.